Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. If you are live with us on Facebook, thank you. If you're live with us on YouTube, thank you so much. Welcome, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, to the September 9th, 2020 edition of Stand Down Live, where Veterans for Peace is asking active duty military, National Guard, and police officers to stand down, to question your orders, question your oath, question your commitment to the flag, to whatever reason you joined, and stand down. We have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Ajamu Baraka. We have to recognize that we are here on occupied land. We have to recognize that this show is taking place across borders. This show is taking place around the world. Wherever you are tuning in from, please share this right now. Share this with your friends. We are live on YouTube and we are live on Facebook. And this is Veterans for Peace asking for the military to stand down in recognition of the importance of Black lives, in recognition of the importance of Indigenous lives, of stolen land around the world. And we're a very radical show. We're a very radical arm of Veterans for Peace, and we get a lot of pushback for that. And we welcome that because we're here for the conversation. And today we have brought a very special guest onto the show. He is a former vice presidential candidate with the Green Party. He is the current chairman of the Black Alliance for Peace. And he is a veteran. He is an elder, and I look forward to this conversation. And I thank Ajamu Baraka for joining us. I'm looking forward to a very lively conversation with you. You are muted. You are muted.
Yes. Well, look, thanks so much for allowing me to join the conversation. I really think this is a very important show, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to have this conversation. Let me get this thing to stop moving. And I guess in our pre-show conversation, I guess we were talking about chairman and chairperson, and you made me the chairman of the Black Alliance for Peace. But I'm just a humble servant of the people. I am the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace, a formation that we launched in 2017, April the 4th, the day that Dr. King was assassinated. And Dr. King, as many of your listeners know, became one of the most predominant anti-war voices in the country in the 1960s. Now, of course, Dr. King came out and opposed the Vietnam War relatively late from the other forces in the Black Liberation Movement, in particular, Black Panther Party, the Revolutionary Action Movement, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and finally, Dr. King in April the 4th, 1967, said he can no longer be silent. So we are building on that shoulder, building on that tradition, and trying to revive what we see as the traditional anti-war, anti-imperialist position of the Black Liberation Movement. I was just looking at a piece today from my first mentor when I went south to organize after I came out the military, Gwen Patton, who was the founder of the National Black Anti-War, Anti-Draft Union, and the argument she was making as to why it was important for Black people and people in general, but Black people in particular, to oppose participating in that conflict in Vietnam. And Gwen was one of the first and most predominant African-American women to talk about the absolute necessity for grounding anti-war work within a Black-centric anti-war formation. And that's what the Black Alliance for Peace is. It is a Black-led organization of African people, Black people, who believe that not only do we need to revive the anti-war and anti-imperialist movement in terms of our traditional internationalism, but we have to link that understanding of why that's important with what's unfolding here in this country, making the link that we are looking at the oppressive reality that informs politics and the economy in the U.S. Nationally, but also what informs the global economy and the activity of the U.S. state globally. And that if one understands that there is this one global system, then you are likely to avoid being confused by appeals to what we call bourgeois nationalism, the notion that we have a obligation to fight for a nation largely created as a consequence of violence and systematic repression and oppression against other poor people who are struggling for their national liberation and national sovereignty, who are exploited and oppressed by the same oppressive system. And what is that system? The global colonial capitalist system. So we're quite clear that we have to make those kind of connections, and we are building a movement to, in fact, do that. And I've been doing this for quite some time. It's not anything new for me. One of the experiences I had that really crystallized everything for me was my period in the U.S. military, coming in at a time where the U.S. military was in complete and utter disarray, demoralized because of the internal contradictions of being involved in a illegal criminal war in Vietnam. I came in 1972 as part of the last class of people who were part of the last draft, and at a draft number of 8. And your listeners, many of them probably remember the whole lottery system that we had in the U.S. And so before I allowed them to snatch me up, I went in as a volunteer so that I can have some degree of control over my experience in the U.S. military, and that's what I did. But in that space, it allowed me to really see the interconnections between what was happening to me and people I knew in the U.S. And the role of the U.S. Globally. And we could talk about that, but it was where I really crystallized and became a real activist. In fact, my first organizing work was, in fact, in the military. And that's a good place to get the organizing training, because it's not like organizing in civilian life where you can walk around with flyers and knock on doors and stuff like that. It was all subterranean and relatively dangerous in the sense that you could be subject to serious reprisals. So I really enjoyed that opportunity. I mean, I hated the military, but I enjoyed the fact that I was able to hone my skills politically and my worldview.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ajamu. With this show, we always want to make sure that we're connecting to the veteran community. And I'm really glad that you brought up your experience in Vietnam and how that affected you. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about what role do veterans have to play in the fight for justice? And how did you evolve over time in your opinions about being a veteran? And how you adapt that to being on the correct side of history, as it were.
Well, I want to piggyback on that question, but
first let me make sure that just a quick correction. I'm a Vietnam veteran, Vietnam era veteran. One of the reasons why I joined was to make sure that I didn't end up in Vietnam. Even though they were drawing down from Vietnam, I had no desire to go to Vietnam. So as a volunteer, it allowed me to be able to pick my eventual assignment. And I ended up in Germany. I want to make sure that's clear because we know that, we don't want to mix up folks who served in Vietnam from those of us who were part of the Vietnam era period. So I want to make sure we're clear about that. I think the role of the military is and organizing in the military is quite critical. I mean, you all started your show off by calling for people to stand down. And that's very, very important politically and morally. That circumstances can lead people into the military. Right now, there's no draft, but we know there's a poverty draft. And so, if one finds themselves in a position where you are in fact in the military for whatever reason, I think it's important that people don't allow that to undermine your humanity, to suppress your critical faculties, to surrender to forces and interests that are fundamentally antagonistic to yours. Now, when we were in the military, not only were we clear about our role in terms and relationship to Vietnam, we discovered things like, for example, the fact that here we are as Black soldiers, and we discovered that on the African continent, that was ablaze with struggles for national liberation and anti-colonial struggles, that in places like Angola and Mozambique, where Africans were in rebellion, Guinea-Bissau, against the Portuguese, that operating through NATO, the U.S. was training Portuguese pilots and providing military equipment to wage war against Africans struggling for their independence. And so it became a real serious dilemma for us, especially the unit that I was in, which was a unit that was involved in aviation unit at that point. And they were training helicopter pilots. Now, they weren't directly, but it was a connection. And so we had some serious discussions and some actions that were planned to oppose that. So, organizing in the military, remembering that people are still human beings in the military, connecting up the fact that when you've had serious social uprisings and revolutions, that if you aren't able to bring over significant portions of the military and the police to the side of the people, that those uprisings are not going to be successful, then it helps to reprioritize the kind of energy and efforts that must be made working with people who are active duty and the role of those of us who find ourselves as military veterans. So I see that sector is very, very important. Unfortunately, though, many elements of the progressive or radical movements in the U.S. and in Europe don't appear to have the cultural competency, the language to be able to make inroads into that sector that social movements really need to have to be made.
Oh, Ajamu, you that's a beautiful point about the language needed from the organizations to bring in these groups. And when you say these groups, you're talking about active duty military and police. You made a point earlier about your intention in bringing this back to the strong radical Black liberation movement. making Black Alliance for Peace come out of that. And you clearly see the connection for Black liberation and the environment, and right, and like saving our planet, right? Like you see that intertwined. I heard that in your language earlier.
Yes.
So the Black liberation movement right now, and the language needed to bring in active duty military and or police officers, to get them to switch sides, to start seeing that in the streets. How does that look?
That's a good question. I think one thing we have to emphasize, one, our common humanity. Secondly, the fact that for those of us in the Black liberation movement, we center African people, no question about that. And we center African working class people. But then we say that this struggle that we are in is not a struggle just to liberate African people. It is because we see ourselves as part of an exploited class, and we see ourselves as a colonized people. Then we see a fundamental connection between ourselves and all other colonized and exploited people. So the question of war and militarism for us is a question of humanity, but it's also a question of class also. So we say that in the Black Alliance for Peace, for example, we say not one drop of blood from the African working class and poor people in defense of the capitalist oligarchy. Not one drop. So the message is, you might find yourself in the security services and all of that, but understand that your interests are not the same as the interests of the rulers, that your class interests are not the same as the rulers, and that the state does not represent interests that really serve you. And so it makes no sense for you to allow yourself to be used as a tool of oppression, a tool of death and destruction against any other group of people. So understand that, and then you won't be confused by these appeals to patriotism and duty by rulers who have no sense of obligation to you or any nation. They see the U.S. as no more than one market. There's no special responsibility they feel to the U.S., to the U.S. economy, to the U.S. people, because they have homes around the world. They have economic interests around the world. So we being conscious and being aware is what informs how we see the world and how we understand our interests. So we have to message to people that you have to do away with any of these BS notions of sentimentality around nation, anything else. You have to look at reality in cold and stark, sober terms in order to make sure you can recognize who your friends are and who are your enemies. So it's a process of struggle and engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think that's absolutely quintessential for the veteran community to understand. We really need to get our heads around these ideas. You have a long and storied career, Ajamu, and I know that I think we should delve into a little bit. I'd like to hear a little bit about, you ran for vice president with Jill Stein. And I'd like to know about why you decided to do that and what lessons you learned along the way on that campaign trail.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, it's a very, I ended up in a place I never thought that I would end up in terms of participating in that way in the electoral process. I've always seen that there are opportunities in that sector that we have not been taking full advantage of. I believe that we have to engage that sector as part of a broader strategy of building alternative power among the people. We have to contest the state and contest the rulers that I have been referring to. And so I ended up with the Green Party. I supported the Green Party because it was the only major electoral party that had the experience and understanding to get itself on the ballot in majority of the states. And it had a program that was a transitional program, a set of demands and policies that, as they are achieved, gradually shifts power from the rulers to the people. And those programs and policies represent a vision of how society might be organized that takes us well beyond what we are today. So the run in 2016 was a run to facilitate the process of building that alternative power, building that opposition at a time where there was real concern about Donald Trump and what he represented. But for us, we have never been confused by the two parties and what they represent objectively. And this idea of this counter-revolutionary notion of a lesser of two evils is something that is repugnant and anti-democratic. And we believe then and believe today that our responsibility is to organize around the principles and values that represent the most advanced thinking and the needs of the people, and go forward, recognizing that the progress that we're going to make, the advances that we make, are not going to be dependent on this electoral cycle. We have to build independent political organizations, independent political structures. The engagement with the electoral process, that's fine. But I think it's a dangerous illusion for people to believe that they're going to make the kind of serious fundamental change that needs to be made just through the electoral arena. It's an important arena, there's no question about that. But if you believe that you're going to be able to effect the kind of fundamental change that we have to make through the electoral process, and that the rulers are going to allow us just to vote them out of office, then I think you are in a very, very dangerous and vulnerable position, because you would be confused and ultimately could end up as being used as a tool against the people themselves.
I've seen that process go back and forth my entire adult life. The play of Democrat it was first Clinton was in response to Bush Sr. He was the liberal one we could get. He was our the first black president, and then in response to that we had Bush, right? So it's always this game. Now you're talking about divestment, right? Like removing yourself from the system. Would you see the use in forming a Black Liberation Party, a political party that ran? Would you see that as a viable possibility in this country? And if so, would you see that being something you could do? Because that could organize on the grassroots and across and on the class scale that you're talking about.
Well, I think that there are various strategies that can be experimented with, and we have organized Black independent political parties in the past that were electoral parties. Of course, we have a number of Black independent political organizations and parties that still are in existence, and many of them are small, of course. So that is a viable path, a viable strategy in terms of building independent power. But it's important to keep in mind that the kind of radical change that has to take place in this country is a change that is going to require the building of coalitions among large numbers of people. That there's no such thing as a Black liberation movement being able to liberate itself by itself. That we're up against a state that represents concrete, specific power, capitalist power. And capitalist power is real and concrete in terms of a ruling class. And in terms of sheer numbers, you know, we have the majority in terms of the numbers of African Americans, the numbers of other colonized people, the conscious white workers that can be won over. I mean, we are in the majority. It is the ruling elite. We refer to the so-called 1%, but I say 1% plus you got to bring in about another 20% of the petty bourgeoisie that has a stake in the system and will fight to maintain their relative privilege vis-a-vis the rest of us. So, we are the majority, and so it means we have to find ways to build structures and create strategies that allow us to realize our majority power and bringing about the kinds of changes we have to make in this country and around the world. And we have to keep on coming back to the fact that the U.S. is an empire. We are at the center of empire. And we are, as I said earlier, we are human beings. We're part of collective humanity. And if you understand what this country is involved in beyond its borders, you understand it is involved in systematic criminal behavior. And this behavior is being done in your name. If you are not in opposition to it, then you are complicit with it. So the struggle that we are waging is not just for ourselves, but it is for oppressed humanity. So our responsibility is to understand that and understand what that means in terms of political strategy and what that means in terms of how we envision the kind of world we have to build. So it has to transcend just our own particular kinds of experiences and groups, as important as they are. So yeah, we recognize each other's differences. We respect everyone's right to organize themselves. We respect and we honor the principle of autonomy and self-determination. But we know that we've had to find ways to work together if we're going to win in this country. And I believe very passionately that we will, in fact, win.
I believe you. And can I ask you about a couple of the coalitions that Black Alliance for Peace has or is forming and sees as very necessary to build to make this movement move?
Well, right now we are helping to revive and rebuild the traditional anti-war and anti-imperialist movement. We're working with various organizations, the United National Anti-War Coalition, the U.S. Peace Council. We work with Cold Pink. We work with a number of organizations in the traditional anti-war community. But we also are going beyond that. Because as I said, we have to build coalitions that transcend our own particular sectorial silos. So we are working with organizations that understand the connection between the principled anti-war positions and the war being waged against Black people and brown people and poor people in this country. Who understand that you can't talk about anti-war and militarism abroad without talking about the war being waged on people domestically. So we are working with groups and educating people on the fact that you have a Department of Defense 1033 program responsible for transferring over $6 billion worth of military grade equipment to these police forces across the country. It is the program primarily responsible for the militarization of the police. We have to raise people's awareness of the fact that these tactics you've seen during the so-called Floyd George uprisings by the military, a lot of those tactics have been learned from the Israeli Defense Forces that have been training U.S. police executives for quite some time in tactics of crowd control and other kinds of techniques, including that technique of attempting to control an individual by putting your knee on their neck and their head to control them. The same thing we saw that resulted in my opinion, in the death of Freddie Gray, when those police, when that one particular police basically jumped on his neck there in Baltimore. So we want people to, and we are working with groups that are understanding those connections and understanding why it's important to make those connections. Issues of nuclear proliferation. That's not something exotic. That is something that we are faced with as a collective humanity. That both political parties are committed to upgrading the U.S. nuclear arsenal. It started under Barack Obama, a $1 trillion nuclear upgrading that the Trump administration continues. So we are making connections with the anti-nuclear community. The 800 to 1,000 U.S. foreign bases. We were instrumental in building a new coalition to close all U.S. foreign bases. We had a huge conference 2 years ago, and we formed a new coalition, and we are working quite hard on that issue. We went further. We then organized an international conference in Dublin, Ireland, where we extended that opposition to U.S. foreign bases into closing our U.S. and NATO foreign bases. And we developed a new international campaign. So we are educating groups in the country on the need to make all of these connections and to be opposed to all of these policies. And the military budget, this obscene military budget that is now taking up 53% of every dollar that the government receives. Our resources are being squandered on military spending, resources that can be used to house the homeless and to build public housing, affordable, decent, humane public housing, money that can be used to upgrade our educational system, to provide free education from preschool through college. Money that could be used to ensure that everyone had access to health care. Health is a human right. It's obscene that in the richest country on the planet, you have 80 million people who are underinsured or with no insurance at all. And especially now in the midst of this pandemic. So we are working with groups that are making these connections across the country, understanding that what underlies all of this stuff is military spending and militarism, the enhancement of the police, the enhancement of the military outside of the U.S. that we refer to as the Army and the Marine Corps. So our task is to help people make those kind of connections, and for people to understand that all of these issues impact us directly and impact all of humanity beyond ourselves.
Yeah, thank you so much. You're really on a tear. I know we're putting the weight of the conversation on you, but you really put it so distinctly and clearly, and I think it's a really piece of valuable information, specifically for Veterans for Peace and anti-war veterans around the world. Um, I saw a headline recently that said that Trump was thinking about taking troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. I have a sinking feeling that it's not because he cares about Muslim people or the effects of the wars that they have on Iraq and Afghanistan, but I would guess it probably has something to do with the expansion of the military into other places and setting them up for war against Russia, against China, and I think principally probably against Africa. I think that Africa has probably always been the crown jewel in capitalist exploitation. They've always wanted to take it. And I know that the Black Alliance for Peace talks a lot about Africa and AFRICOM and its role in the world. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about what Black Alliance for Peace says about Africa and what you think is happening there.
Well, and I'll make, as we are making connections, I'll make the connection between AFRICOM and the other global U.S. commands. We are living, as I said, in the middle of an empire. And the reality of that is reflected in things like the fact that the U.S. has literally divided up the entire world into its command structures. The command structure that was created a few months before the first Black president came into office, Barack Hussein, some of us say insane, Obama assumed office, was the U.S. Africa Command with its headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany. This effort was seen or framed as an instrument to help Africa, to help it to deal with the growing threats, security threats related to the so-called war on terror. But the main objective of AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command, is to expand the U.S. presence on the African continent. While the Chinese are involved in various kinds of activities on the African continent, providing support for infrastructural development, direct economic investments in various sectors of various countries, the U.S. response has been to try to maintain and expand its influence by expanding itself militarily, creating conditions on the African continent that would result in various states inviting the U.S. in to provide security support. And the result has been a 1,900% expansion of the AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command, the military footprint on the African continent since its creation in October the 1st, 2008. So we are attempting to make people aware of the fact that there's this growing footprint on the African continent, and that every place we have seen the insertion of U.S. troops, we are seeing an acceleration of destabilization, of military activity and actions. The very thing that they said they are there to prevent, we see an escalation as soon as you have a presence of U.S. military forces. And so we are making a demand to close down, to shut down AFRICOM, and to make Africa a zone of peace. And we're calling on the U.S. to shut down Africa. We're calling on all external powers to commit to demilitarizing the African continent and allowing it to be a zone of peace. So we are fighting very strongly to do that by making people aware of the fact that this Africa Command exists, and putting pressure on various U.S. authorities, in particular for us, the representatives in the Congressional Black Caucus. These representatives that theoretically are supposed to be serving the interests of the Black communities and people who voted them in office, but who have been systematically defending the interests of white power. So we are attempting to put pressure on them, to call on hearings, and to expose what is really happening on the African continent with AFRICOM. Again, but it's important to know. It's important to note, my last quick comment, that not only do we have issue with AFRICOM, we are now expanding our concern into another very important region, and that is what they refer to as the Indo-Pacific Command. This is another U.S. command structure that's primarily responsible for the military forces in the Asia Pacific, where now they are very aggressively enhancing military forces in order to complete the encirclement of China, to complete the pivot to Asia, started under Barack Obama. And now we're in the phase also of the ideological conditioning or the ideological propping up of an anti-Chinese sentiment to allow for an escalation of activities and actions that could very easily lead to some kind of direct military conflict. So we are moving to expand our work and connect up our anti-AFRICOM work with bringing awareness to the threats to peace that is being represented by the enhancement of the Indo-Pacific Command.
Ajamu, I have to say, I salute you in your ability to coalesce these movements, to bring them together so effectively, and to see where it's all at, and to articulate it so clearly to us. I really thank you for this lesson today. Imperialists, when people think of imperialism, I don't think most Americans don't think of themselves as part of an empire and an imperial empire. But you've been making some really good points today about where the money goes, and 53% of our U.S. budget going to military bases, and we're taught to like love the military and from such a young age to glorify the military and to celebrate it. So then when we think about 53% of the budget going to the military, we're like, it's glory, that's the American glory. But we're not thinking about these bases being overseas and what the base is doing in the community around them, and the violence that's coming up around the base. And that's a connection that you're making really clearly for people. I just wanted to reiterate it. I just wanted to echo that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we all experienced that firsthand with all our deployments overseas, whether it was Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan or Okinawa or wherever we went. We all experienced that firsthand, that the military is an absolute cancer. It goes in and it takes land, it extracts resources, it pollutes. Okinawa has constant problems with nuclear radiation and contamination, and Marines going out and raping and running over the local populace. And I witnessed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iraq, it was the birthplace of civilization. It was Sumeria. It was the biblical roots of Abraham. This place should be an international destination for all religious people, and people interested in archaeology. It should be a place of pilgrimage, but it's not. It's contaminated with depleted uranium rounds, which we illegally fired at civilians under Bush, and I believe Obama. They probably fired depleted uraniums rounds as well. And so, yeah, that's the reality we live in. It's the military and the industrial military complex and its 800 bases are an absolute poison. And it's a priority that we stand up against up against the U.S. military. Let's see. We've been talking for 46 minutes now. We've covered a lot of base. A lot of bases.
We've covered a lot of bases, and you know, Ajamu has been so inviting. Like literally, you know, I'm really off put by people who are off put by this man, because
Right.
it doesn't seem based in anything except his skin color. I can't call out any other reason that anything you said today would put a person off, except that it's coming out of your mouth.
Well, I think, you know, even in the veteran anti-war community, we have a lot of problems with the fact that settler colonialism, the idea that the United States was built and based on settler colonialism, and its roots still exist in even the anti-war veteran left. It's still there. We haven't effectively addressed it, and we have to absolutely wash it out of people's brains. And we have a lot of work to do. But that's why Ajamu is so valuable as a representative, as a veteran, and we're really quite honored to have you here. I love your ability to be able to put together this functioning worldview. You know, because we're so confused. It takes a long time for us to put all these ideas together. It takes a lot of study and dedication, and sometimes it's painful. It hurts. You have to forget a lifetime of brainwashing and build a new platform to see the world with.
We are masters at compartmentalizing the pain. Veterans compartmentalize the pain, and I think Americans do at this point in time too. How can you not be compartmentalizing the pain and still going? You know, you're still giving your money to a system that is killing your people. You know, like okay, so there's a movement right now for the importance of Black lives, which are killed at a rate higher than white lives by police. But police officers are killing white people as well.
Sure.
You know, like at a huge rate. Like 69% of the US population is white, and I believe about 49% of police killings, or 59% of police killings, are white. It's a huge number. 24% of police killings are Black, and we're 16% of the population. And that's why there's such a movement for it, because it's a number higher than our U.S. You know, statistical population.
And you just inflated our numbers too. It's really about 13%.
It was only 13%?
Right.
And well, so 13% of the population, 24% of the police murdered. Where's the movement? I mean, do people who aren't fighting for their children's lives think that police have the right to kill? Do you think that's a common belief in America, that people think that police have the right to kill people?
I really don't, and I think that there's a real concern, and real concern even among elements of the white community. But the community that ends up being victimized by police violence is what part of the white community? The poorest part of the white community. What segment of white society is hated the most in this country? Poor white folks. No one speaks to them or for them except the radical right. And that's why they've been making inroads with that community, because they have come in and said, you know what, you all are getting screwed over by everybody, by your own kind, by the elites in Washington and New York, by these folks who they bringing in to take your jobs, by these Black folks who, you know, are threatening to you, you know, and they give them a world view that speaks to their pain and to their confusion. And again, they're able to do that because on the other side, the folks who have the mic are usually smug, liberal types that have a view the same as the elites, the other elites, that basically these people are deplorables. They're to be written off. And, it's a very dangerous situation because, this growing movement is still relatively disorganized. I know everybody's concerned about fascism and all of that, but a lot of that's been confused by people not really understanding what fascism is, and sort of reducing it to authoritarianism and all of that, and looking for the spectacle of the brown shirts in 2020, where a more subtle, sophisticated neo-fascism that's moving to and strengthening the state, that's imposing an ideological conformity. These elements aren't receiving the same kind of level of scrutiny. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. My point is this, that basically we've seen some horrendous examples of police engaged in criminal activity vis-a-vis the white community. I was trying to remember the name of the person that we all saw that tape in a hotel hallway when the man was on his knees like this and was begging not to be shot. And the viewpoint was from the angle of the police with his long rifle. And of course, he ended up shooting him. That was a white person. That was white on white crime. So, there is real concern about this, but that's why it's important for us to, as we criticize and critique, to also, again, remember the humanity of the folks, and the fact that we don't we're not apologizing for people, but there's real confusion out there among everyone. And so those appeals to people's humanity and their common sense is something that we have to continue to do, because that's the only way we can win people back to rationality and back into the fold of humanity. Because of that, they in fact will be instruments against the people as they are today.
I think you made a really good point about the intersection of race and class. I think you see the biggest support for Trump and the state essentially in the South, around where Black people have historically been the most oppressed. Where Black people are the most oppressed, everyone ends up being the most oppressed. That in the South, where poverty in Southern Alabama, there's lots and lots of poor whites, and I think that those struggles are absolutely connected, and that's why those poor whites are so attracted to the radical right, because you're right, they're the only ones that are speaking to them. They present this false dichotomy. But of course they pretend like class doesn't exist, and they boil everything down to race and whatever silly thing they come up with. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought.
But Mike, interesting thing about that, they don't really just boil it down to race. They have a very interesting and relatively sharp and class critique. They talk about the elites. They talk about the working class. The problem is they end up in the wrong place. For us, we understand that we have to take power from the elite and we have to build a new society. For them, it's really about just reforming the elite, getting rid of the unpatriotic elite, reforming capitalism, make it more fair, and everything will be fine. That's why they voted for Donald Trump. So yeah, they have an analysis, and because of that kind of analysis, that's why many of them can be won over than people kind of realize. But we don't get access to them, and when you get access to them, sometimes they cut you off. Or, one of the critiques that came out for me in 2016 was Ajamu was doing right-wing radio. Well, you know why I did right-wing radio? Because what we're talking about today. I enjoyed having those conversations with people, and until they started cutting me off because I was winning too many people over. So, but that came out as, examples of Ajamu's rightist tendencies or something. I don't know. But, it's what you were saying too, Miles, a little bit a while ago, that, you know, people, we have to think for ourselves. You know, we have to understand that no one can be reduced just to a caricature, that basically people are complex human beings with complex positions. And so, you know, people who want to critique me because they say I'm a sadist or some kind of crap, they have no understanding what my position is on Assad or on the Kurds or whatever. You know, they don't understand that basically we have a consistent principled position respecting national sovereignty, and that whatever the internal contradictions might be in the nation is up to those people themselves to solve it. Our responsibility is keep the U.S. the hell out. Okay, if we can do that, we have served humanity. That's my position.
I I I agree with your position 1000%. I'm really happy that we had you on the show. I actually went to Black Alliance for Peace a few weeks ago and became a patron, and I would recommend that for anybody in the audience. Once again, I know I didn't recommend that before, but I'm recommending it now. If you go to Black Alliance for Peace, you can scroll down to the bottom of the page and become a patron, because you know what you've been talking about today and what you put forward, your platform is human rights. You know, you come from this strong radical black liberation um stage or platform, because that, as you have said here, is all that's ever brought equality for other groups. um yeah, at least in this country, you know, the Black liberation movement has been instrumental in all sorts of freeing and rights getting and equality getting for people. And even putting it to the side, other people have gotten rights, you know, as a way to not give this group rights. Think about the Industrial Revolution, think about women's suffrage. So I really appreciate what you have done here today. And I would like to, AFRICOM, I definitely need to get more familiar with AFRICOM, and I'd like to be a voice for that. And I'd like to ask if you have anything that you want to say, any closing statements, or if Mike, you know, if you have another question for him, Mike.
I would just add, you know, yeah, we'd love to hear any closing statements, a call to action, and specifically, what can veterans do, and what do you think, like VFP and About Face and all these different veteran organizations, what should we be doing?
I think we have to build better structures that allow us access to active duty military forces. You know, when I was in the military, it was very easy to find military support, anti-military support. We had access to lawyers and everything else. I know that some of that exists, but I think we have to strengthen that, because the trajectory of U.S. activity is toward more the use of more military. Now they are shy now about committing large concentrations of military forces like what they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. But it's almost inevitable, if they are playing around with China, that that could be quickly reversed. So we've got to be able to have a situation where we can reach out to people, connect up with active duty soldiers, provide them opportunities for education, materials they can use to go back and educate among themselves. I think that's vitally important, in my opinion. And lastly, real quick, I know we almost out of time. I really appreciate the conversation, and we'll echo to please go to Black Alliance for Peace. You can sign up as a supporter. And you can support us. We're not an NGO. We go to the people hand in hand for resources. We are taking on a lot of work, a lot of responsibilities, and we need your support. Help us in the work that we're doing to shut down AFRICOM, to reduce the military budget, to stop the proliferation of nuclear arms, and to bring back some sanity to this country and to this culture. Get organized, join organizations, get active, stay active with VFP. Let's make sure that they don't shift their focus onto Nicaragua. Let's support what is unfolding, the democratic process or whatever process you might want to define it in Venezuela. Let's keep the U.S. the hell out of other people's business and try to clean up and repair the U.S. itself.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You know, don't shut off yet. Don't shut off yet. Let me echo that a third time, because you are an individual-led organization. You are not a massive nonprofit. You are not a, it's not a huge financial structure, and you are doing a lot of work. There is a lot of work being done. So I'll put that call out to the public for people who are looking to support the Black movement for liberation in this world. You needn't look no further, okay? Like, support individuals and support organizations that are actually making change in the world. I really thank you for coming on today, brother. Thank you.
Let me jump in real quick. If you go to GoFundMe, you can also donate there. We have a $10,000 challenge grant. If we get 10,000, we get another 10,000. So I almost forgot about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and that's our show. And we'll be here every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Please come back and check us out. Ajamu will be here, and you're welcome back anytime. We'd love to have you.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah. Don't forget to call me back anytime.
Okay, we will. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Peace in the world. Put down your arms. Police officers, put down your arms. Stop killing us. Stop killing the people. Military men and women, you know what I'm saying? Question your service right now. Call the numbers. You see the hotline. Tune in every week. Share this. It's an open conversation. As you can see, we are all about human rights. We are doing what you enlisted for. So we love you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Mike, for being here with me, man. Thank you, bro. Thank you, everybody in the chat. We love you. We'll see you next week. Peace, y'all.